This is Fans on the Run, a podcast made by, for, and about Beatles fans. And now, here's your host, Alexanian.
All right, hello. Welcome back to Fans on the Run, everyone's favorite Beatles podcast. Said me, you can quote me on that. I usually say don't quote me on that, but I'm feeling pretty good about myself today, so you know what? Quote me on that. I was looking at my iTunes for the show, so even if you've just started the episode, please go ahead and rate the show 5 stars wherever you're listening to it. I don't make any money off the show, it's just, it helps my ego, and I got this really nice thing today and it put a twinkle in my eye, and now I have a skip in my step. I usually have delusional ramblings at the start of the show, but this is a more positive delusional rambling than usual. So, there you go. That's a little special treat for y'all. I just said y'all. What the fuck? Okay, well, you learn something new every day. Anyways, end delusional rambling. We have a fantastic guest for you today. He is probably one of the, comprehensive authorities on the solo Beatles world. Back in the year 2000, he and Mark Easter wrote 8 Arms to Hold You, the Solo Beatles Compendium, which is basically the ultimate reference guide to anything involving the solo Beatles. And if that wasn't good enough, in 2018, they went back and updated it as a PDF ebook, and it's even better now. Well, I don't really know compared to the original. I was talking with my friend Tom Hunyadi. He has the original, and we compared notes, and it is comprehensive-er, as if it wasn't already comprehensive enough. And if that wasn't good enough, he has written Lennonology, Strange Days Indeed, A Scrapbook of Madness, co-written by Scott Riley, and it's volume 1 of what one hopes to be many. Please welcome to the show, Chip Madinger. Well, welcome to Fans on the Run.
Hi, Ethan.
Was my introduction too rambly?
Well, it wasn't too bad. Last night's was equally as good.
Yeah. Breaking the fourth wall here.
Yeah.
Yes, I will admit, this is one of those times where I was not on my A game, and this is the second attempt. I take the shame, I take the blame. But you know what? Today's a new day. So, how are you doing today compared to yesterday?
I'm good. It's, weather's great. Start of the weekend. And we're one day closer to the election.
One day closer. Some would say that's a good thing. Some would say it's, existential dreadfulness.
We'll find out soon.
Well, there's only a few more days away. We're saying this now, but by the time the episode goes up, the results will happen and we all could be dead by then. So it'll just be the cockroaches listening to this show. The cockroaches and Keith Richards. Although I don't know what Keith Richards would be doing listening to a Beatles podcast. Anyways, I want to jump right back to the beginning, because you are an author, but you are a Beatle fan.
That's right.
So, when did you first discover the Beatles?
I think my first time I ever heard the Beatles probably would have been on WLS out of Chicago. We were able to pick that up where I lived, and so obviously they were a top 40 station, and I had a little cassette recorder that I'd hold the microphone up whenever.
Well, even I know WLS, as a Canadian, was one of the big, stations that kind of broke the Beatles.
So it was the Beatles and believe it or not, Motown. At the time, seemed to be my favorites, and as I was saying, I was gifted a tape recorder, and I'd go through and I'd faithfully record all the songs off the air, and to this day, I still hear the late starts and the DJ banter over the end of the songs at times. I was so familiar with the tapes.
Well, since the show likes to take a lot of side turns and back alleys, you brought up Motown. I'll just throw this in. What is your favorite Motown group?
Probably Stevie Wonder. I think that's an easy question, what's your favorite rock group? But I left Motown a long time ago. So tended to go for a little harder sound. So
whenabouts did you discover the Beatles? Were they still a group?
No. I'm technically a second-generation Beatles fan, born in 1963. And the first things I remember hearing would have been Hey Jude and Uncle Albert comes to mind. And then it's 1973 and the Blitz came along, the second wave with the Red and the Blue albums. And
73 was a great year all around because you had Red Rose Speedway, Mind Games, Ringo, not 33 and a third, Living in the Material World, and the Red and the Blue. It was it was awesome. It must have been an exciting time.
Still remember going to the department stores, which carried records back then, had a large record department, and pulling the 8-tracks out, and because they would always have the songs listed on the cover. The albums didn't necessarily have the song listing, so that's how I'd go and get the song titles, would be looking at the 8-track labels.
Yeah, well, but you didn't buy the 8 tracks.
No, didn't buy the 8-track.
Well, at least they served a purpose.
That's right.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, what department store would you have been going to in those days?
J.C. Penney's comes to mind. There was a drugstore, liquor store that had a huge record department here in St. Louis called Skaggs. Those are really the ones that come to mind.
And
Woolworths.
With these first Beatles records, what was the first record by the Beatles you remember owning?
It would have been Magical Mystery Tour that would have been gifted to me probably as remnants of a garage sale. I got a stack of albums, and Magical Mystery Tour was top of the pile.
Now, here's the important question. This is the most important question in the show. Did it have the booklet?
Yes.
Hallelujah. There you go. And thus began your endeavors as a collector. Is that really how you started?
That and I would haunt the used record stores, the dollar bins. And back then, Beatle albums were not $40 a pop for beat copies in the used bins. You could amass a nice collection for $10. You could pick up quite a few albums. They might skip here and there and have writing all over the cover, but it was the music that mattered at the time.
Chip, you're killing me here. You're killing me. I paid, oh God, I hate saying this, $40 for a copy of Rubber Soul Mono that has, a little bit of ringwear on the cover because that was the best price I had found in a while. That's really depressing.
Nowadays, you have to strike when the iron's hot. If you see something and you want it, you've got to get it, because when you leave it and go back for it, it's not going to be there.
It's just, I love hearing the stories of back when records, you could find them for like $1 a pop, and they weren't just, Herb Albert and, Barbra Streisand records.
This is sad, but I still remember the names that were written on the front cover of my first White Album.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have any shout-outs you'd like to give to those names?
No, I have no idea who they are, but they would have probably lived in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Well, the White Album, that's one of the albums I have a hard time grappling with as a collector, because the minimalist white cover is cool and all if you have like a minty copy, but you'll spend like hundreds of dollars trying to find one that isn't either covered in ringwear, or fucking coffee stains, or writing.
That might have been part of the appeal of it, was that every cover would end up being different, not only because of the numbers on it, but because of the writing and the stains and the leftovers that you spoke of.
Well, kind of on that, do you know about the guy who has this kind of exhibit where it's like a record store, but it's like, we buy White Albums?
No, I think that's all he's got.
Yeah.
Isn't it a shop in San Francisco or somewhere in California?
I don't think it's a shop. I think it's like an exhibit, kind of.
Okay.
Which really pains me because I follow him on Instagram and he posts all the White Albums, and occasionally there's some like really nice ones, and it's like, oh, come on, you're hoarding them all.
That must be very exciting.
Just let me have one. Like, you have 47 Japanese mint copies of the White Album. Give me one. Save some for the rest of us peasants. Yeah. Anyways, I'm not bitter. Who said I'm bitter? So, as I'm working my way towards, how you started writing the books, but a big part of that is you being, or amassing this collection and being a collector. I want to ask, right now in your collection, what is the rarest record you own?
Oh my. Not a Beatles record.
Oh, that's
but
okay.
Beatles record wise, I might have to get back to you on that one.
Like a Butcher?
Butchers, or I've got a lot of signed items, not necessarily signed by the groups, but individually signed items.
How many signatures do you own?
Probably a dozen.
Of all four?
No.
Oh.
None of them are on the same. It's either a Paul alone or a George alone, or a John and Yoko together. But no, I do not have a set of group signatures.
Well, I mean, having any signatures is awesome, and you have like a dozen of them.
Yeah. And
Again,
the best one is the one that Mark Easter and I, we actually got to meet Paul and Linda in 1994 when Linda was doing a promotional junket for her line of vegetarian TV dinners. And St. Louis was a test market, so she and Paul came to town and did a press conference, and we got our way in with credentials of some sort, and were able to have a few minutes, share a few minutes with the two of them.
Were the credentials legit?
They were kind of.
Yeah. Well, those are the best kind of credentials.
They were hard-earned.
They were hard-earned credentials. Because I don't think anyone, like any fan, really ever has credentials to anything, but they always find their way in.
Unless they're in the business, that's probably it.
Well, we're a determined lot. Is there any like holy grail item that like you searched the longest time for, that just kept eluding you, but then you finally got it?
Yes.
What might that be?
That would have been the German Mary Had a Little Lamb single that has the alternate mix on it.
Oh, that's right. Well, so I didn't realize, because me being... I know more about the Beatles as a group and all the alternate mixes and stuff. And your book was a real eye-opener for me, that the solo stuff was just as hectic and crazy in terms of variations of mixes as the group stuff, and in some instances more.
There are quite a lot of variations, and also it came down to the marketing. In those days, the Beatles would have singles and they'd have albums, and never the twain should meet. But as the solo years went on, the singles were pulled from the albums, and sometimes they were different mixes or different edits. There weren't necessarily as many variations between the two mixes, since by that time mono mixes were simply fold downs, with the exception of the Ram album and the first two Paul McCartney singles. So there weren't that many variations to sort out, but they started marketing with 7 inches, 12 inches CDs of the same song. For example, Figure of 8, I believe there were 8 variations released in the UK for that disc. Well,
it's not really different mixes, but Paul's still kind of doing that to this day. Like the other week, he's a brilliant marketer, selling 10 different colored vinyl variations of an album that no one's heard anything from yet. By the time this is out, the album will be out, and it'll either be a modern classic or it'll be shit.
And I will not admit how many copies I bought.
Okay, well, did you... Were you one of the lucky ones who got the Third Man Yellow?
No.
Okay.
No. I was up a little too late for that one. I think that went on... I don't know what time that went on sale, but they were long gone by the time I got there.
Well, I think it was Third Man kind of screwed the pooch there, because they put it up too early, and it didn't, match the rest of them, because everything else went live at the same time.
Right.
So,
right.
I think... again, I'm 18, so I sent the link to the red Third Man one to my mom, and it said, Christmas present, ? And the pre-order, she's like, okay, and then the pre-order sold out right away, and so I am just hoping that Santa Claus brings me some red vinyl.
Yep, and I don't think we're done yet. I think there'll probably be more and more deluxe versions. I think he saw with Egypt Station how many times he could sell the same album.
But doesn't that... I'll share an opinion. It may be a bit of an unpopular one, but I want to see what you think. It's making me a little jaded in terms of collecting, because it's not even like a classic album like Sgt. Pepper, where you kind of... It sometimes justifies buying like a couple copies.
You mean you'll play it more than once?
Yeah. But buying, there's the Egypt Station, there's the one that folds out like an accordion, there's the one on blue and orange vinyl, there's the Spotify green vinyl, and then, Traveler's Edition, Egypt Station 2, and then a suitcase, and oh my god. Does anyone
I drew the line into suitcase.
Does anyone actually like this album?
Crickets.
Crickets speak volume here. I'm sure there are defenders of Egypt Station, and everyone has a right to be wrong. Everyone's allowed to be wrong.
I remember you're talking about the many permutations. People used to be upset when the singles weren't on the McCartney albums, like Mull of Kintyre or Goodnight Tonight were not on Back to the Egg, and Mull of Kintyre wasn't on London Town. And things have kind of flipped a full 180 and around again.
Oh, but at this point, I feel like they'll do anything they can to sell as many physical copies of something as possible, because... Well,
there are a couple reasons for that, and one is because if they pre-order 8 copies of the same album, that will greatly increase its chances of entering the charts at number one, which is what we saw happen with Egypt Station.
Yeah, because it registers as, instead of 1 copy, someone bought 8 copies. And so that's why you get, Egypt Station shoots to number 1 in its first week, and then drops to number 63 in its next. But, yeah, it's getting a little frustrating, because as a collector, I'm sure you feel kind of the same. You have this urge to want to get things, even if you don't really want them.
Kind of like the big flaming pie box.
Yeah. Well,
which once you have it in hand, it's a beautiful thing, but you look at it once and then you file it away.
Yeah. You reach a threshold. With the Flaming Pie, I'm fine with the 3 LP version. That's fine. It's $70. Perfect. I don't need all the other stuff. Especially in this age of streaming. It's all, available.
And that's another reason they feel that they need to sell 8 copies is because there are 8 people that are going to illegally download it or stream it rather than purchasing it.
Well, I feel like illegally downloading doesn't really happen as much anymore because, it's not even illegal anymore. You can just do it for free with Spotify and YouTube.
And that's right.
Yeah.
Stream makes it even easier because you can search for precisely what you want.
We've gotten more sophisticated than the days of Napster.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing, okay, I will admit, and, well, you could appreciate this because you like Bootleg, the only thing I've ever illegally downloaded, for legal reasons, this didn't happen, but for the sake of the story, it did. Wink, wink. I downloaded... I may have downloaded about 3 gigabytes worth of Beatles bootlegs.
Mm-hmm.
That's as much as I've done.
So how do you fill your unreleased Beatles collection then? How do you...
Well, I have them all as... I can't remember the company that compiled them, because it's this, like, something purple chick, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're like deluxe edition things for the albums. Right. So I have each of those in my computer, and then I have I may or may not have all of the BBC stuff as well, which I think I'm going to need to buy a new hard drive because it basically feels like I have like 5 gigabytes worth of Brian Matthews. Like, so lads, tell us about this next number.
And in the old days, the BBC stuff was gold. There, I'm trying to remember the year. It would have been the mid '80s, I think, when the Beatles at the Beeb radio, the series of bootleg albums began to appear, and we'd never heard them in that quality before.
Well, but those albums are really special because I feel like they mark a point in the history of bootlegs where it's the covers went from being, you know, like a colored sheet of paper with like a badly Xeroxed picture of the band to something that looks like EMI could have made it. Like those Beatles at the Beeb albums are gorgeous. They have wonderful covers.
They do. They do.
And, you know, if old bootlegs weren't so expensive, I'd have them all. But except people like to charge, like, ooh, $50.
Well, there's an appeal to the old slip sheet, as we call them, bootlegs, that had the, you know, they were pressed one play. Well, and even now, the bootleggers just became more sophisticated. They print the covers in one place, and most of the albums would be pressed in Canada, and they'd be assembled someplace else, and that's just the way the business developed.
Well, I'm trying to remember the name of the company that did like most of the early prominent bootlegs. Was it Trademark Equality or
Trademark Equality?
Or were they later?
No, Trademark Equality was in there at the beginning, I believe.
That's the one with the logo. It's the pig with the cigar in its mouth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
PMOQ. Which has even been adopted as a label today, although it's completely different people.
Yeah, but it's all about the brand recognition. Ooh, whoa! I just kind of stuttered there. But anyways, I'll ask you something else. What is, out of all of the bootlegs you own, it could be because of the cover, could be because of what's on it, what is your favorite bootleg? Could be solo, could be Beatles. Actually, no, I'll split that into 2. What's your favorite Beatles bootleg?
It would have to have been the ultra rare tracks, because when those came out, it was like nothing we'd ever heard before. I mean, you can't imagine it, because when you started collecting all of the ultra rare tracks and all of the John Barrett tapes that had surfaced, but at that time they were being dropped in little 30-minute chunks.
And this was pre-anthology, so nothing had been official.
I'd have to say
they got close with that Sessions album, but that fizzled out just as soon as it happened.
Right. So I'd have to say that the unreleased tracks, or ultra rare tracks, volumes 1 and 2, would be my first, or not my first, but my favorite Beatles boot. As for solo, probably would have been Bigatone's Absolute Elsewhere, the Mind Games set, just because the production on the commercial Mind Games was so cluttered And here we were able to hear the album in its rough mix form, and it was just there was just such a greater clarity to it.
I don't find myself buying bootlegs that often these days, but because of, the internet, you can find everything you want, but I do have a few favorites of my own, and it's mainly because of the charm of the artwork. It's even though one of them sounds like dog shit, it's the Beatles versus the Third Reich from the mid-'80s.
Yep.
It's that I would buy just an empty jacket of. I'm not going to say how much I paid for it, but I would have paid anything.
A brilliant piece of artwork. Piss off Pete.
Yeah. And all the tracks on the back, like, come give me dein penis. Where is your papers? And then one I just picked up a couple weeks ago, the Sapgore series from the late 80s out of quote-unquote New Zealand.
Those were more for the covers than anything else.
Yeah.
The contents were quite weak.
Yeah, but owning a Beatles album called Fuck is worth its weight in gold. I
don't know what United Artists were thinking.
Yeah, I know. It's just for the shock factor. I love being able to bring friends over and they're like, oh wow, you have way too many Beatles records. It's like, what don't you own? I'm like, well, you want to see something weird? Boom. Fuck. Either that or I pull out the Help with the Shell, the gas logo. Mm-hmm. That, I think, is one of the biggest anomalies. Even though it has a documented history, it's just...
Well, there would be a lot of tie-ins in the 60s, but just like there are nowadays, and they tied in with Shell Oil Corp, and they actually were able to produce an album. I mean, nowadays with the control that the record labels have over the acts, something like that had never happened nowadays.
I'm gonna go back to the book. So I can't even imagine how long it must have taken to do, especially in the pre-internet age. What were some of the biggest resources you had at your disposal to do these, or to gather this information?
No, I assume we're talking about 8 arms.
8 arms.
8 arms. It would have been, up till that time, a lifetime of tape collecting and trading, not only live material and TV material, but interviews as well, which, actually would tell a lot of the story. We interviewed many of the musicians on the albums, the recording engineers, some of the record label people, and in those days we were fortunate enough to have access to the Federation of Musician contracts.
Really?
For the albums, because if an album was recorded in the U.S. and the session musicians were used, a contract had to be issued to collect the wages. And they would often incorrectly have the date of the session and the songs that were recorded. And up until that time, there was very little of that information known outside of the Lewis and Sessions book. But there was nothing for the solo years. So between AFMs in L.A. and Nashville and New York, and the engineers and their diaries and the musicians and the like, we were able to put together, I think, a very good picture of a lot of primary research for the solo years.
Since times have kind of changed, and the book has been updated, but it's been updated with more information through the year 2000.
That's correct.
At the present time, which Beatle do you think has done the best job at presenting their catalogs and their vaults to the people?
I would say that the Lennon estate has been the most generous, but the McCartney camp has put together the best packages. with the Harrison State. I don't know what's going on there.
There's been practically nothing, George. The only thing of note to come from the Harrison estate in the past, 6 years, was that vinyl box set. But even those were just reissues.
Right. It was a good place for a new collector to get all of the albums in new condition.
I mean, it saved me money on buying, well, I probably will buy an original pressing of, Live in Japan or Brainwashed.
Both of those, were published when vinyl was at its low point, and rightfully commanded, extreme prices before they were reissued.
Well, I'm glad that Paul, one of the happiest moments of last year was when they did that reissue series of all the live stuff, and they finally reissued Paul is Live. So it's, thank God I don't have to pay $150, $200 for it.
I agree.
I mean, after paying what I paid for an original copy of Off the Ground, I don't really want to be buying much original 90s vinyl. There it is. Oh my, whoa. You folks at home cannot see what is going on, but Chip just pulled out a gem. Could you explain to the people at home what you are holding?
That is a copy of the original Paul is Live UK pressing that this guy wrote his name on it.
What a schmuck. What an ass.
Yeah.
What does the scribble look like?
It looks like it says Paul mix something.
Yeah.
But he was gracious enough to sign that and to sign some other things for us when I told you we caught him at the press conference.
That is, I think, the most impressive thing a guest has ever done on the show. It's the ultimate power move. That is... I am kind of speechless. And, Jesus.
Cut.
What is that? What is that one?
That's the stranglehold sleeve.
And it also has that same scribble of the British man named Paul mix something.
But he wrote it to me.
He wrote it to you.
It was pretty exciting.
Wow. Pulling out 2 autographed Paul McCartney records like they're, nothing is just, mind-blowing.
Fortunately, I know where they still are.
Yeah. Because I was told the story once by another collector friend. They had an autograph. It got misplaced. And they are now sad. But, oh, man. You can't see at home, again, because this is an audio show and it's my show, and I don't like showing my face. But could you explain some of the top items?
Well, it's just come from 45 years of collecting. And a lot of these things were obtained when they were new and were much easier to come across. So, I've started to liquidate the collection now just for other generations of fans. And so, some of the top items are gone, and some of them I'm going to hold on to and pass on to the kids. So,
well, if you ever feel the need, if you feel one of those gold records is, a little too heavy on your wall, I'll send you my address.
All right.
So I've got a couple more questions about 8 Arms, but then I want to ask you some questions about Lennonology. So, with 8 Arms, what was the song, or, because you cover everything from, TV appearances to tour dates to, everything. But the stuff I found most fascinating as, a record-obsessed or not record, but just music obsessed nerd is reading about all these, variations of songs, different mixes, different things that, like, I can't remember which one, but there was like a mix that you could only find on the Australian Axis Records version of one release.
Plastic Ono Band.
And it was, one of them had like a longer fade out. How did you manage to track down as many of these variations in a pre-Y2K world?
Well, there was, a network of collectors, and it just went at a much slower pace. It was just generated by the speed of the U.S. mail. And trading abroad. I mean, it didn't cost $20 to send a record overseas back then. So it was a lot easier to get import pressings and the like. When you couldn't find them at a record store, you could probably find another collector in that country that would track one down for you. So, and it was just through that network and some self-discovery. When I first tracked down a copy of the Monoram album, it hadn't been documented yet that it was a completely different mix.
Hold on, I'm going to stop you right there. The Monoram album, it's been reissued for the Record Store Day, but this book was not written then. Does that mean you actually had the Monoram album?
I had access to a Monoram album. I do not own a copy of the Monoram.
But you had access. What was that like?
That was the goal of the book, was to go through and to listen to everything, US and UK, and these things would present themselves, all these different edits, and in the case of the Monoram, the different mixes.
There's one thing that really stood out to me, kind of, when I was reading about the Band on the Run album. It's, to other people, this would not be interesting. To me, this was a gripping read. The CD versions of Band on the Run, a bit of a clusterfuck, to put it generally. Mm-hmm. What happened?
Well, as you know, there was the US and the UK carried different track listings with the inclusion of Hell on Wheels in the US. Mm-hmm. And primarily when CDs were first issued in the mid to late 80s, they would be produced from the UK tapes, the copy tapes. Mm-hmm. And so when they pressed the original copies of Band on the Run, it did not have Hell on Wheels. So fast forward to Capitol creating their own CD pressing plant in Jacksonville, Illinois, and they had a copy of the U.S. tapes. And when they reissued Band on the Run as manufactured in the U.S., here is Hell on Wheels. Another anomaly with the Band on the Run CDs was when the DTS pressing came out. The first three notes of Band on the Run were indexed incorrectly on the album, so they were chopped off. You'd have to put in the disc and rewind it to a -3 seconds to catch the whole song.
The DTS, is that the 1999 one?
That would have been the 19. I think they surfaced in 1997 initially, and they were marketed differently. They did come out in 1999 on a broad scope in Best Buy and the like, but the initial pressing of Band on the Run was truncated. And one thing I would like to note is all of this is very well guarded by three very large dogs, Winston, Ben, and Jets. That
yeah, it's, you can release the hounds.
Exactly.
I have a dog. I have a dog. That would not happen because he's a golden retriever. His IQ is as high as his age, and he is turning 5. He's a very good boy, but he's not the smartest.
They're wonderful as puppies.
He's, God, fucking dog. I'm not bitter. He didn't keep me up last night. Last question. This is an opinionated question. Was going through every song that on every John, Paul, George, Ringo album, including the Yoko tracks, painful in some regards?
Not as painful as listening to all of the live Ringo and live McCartney shows. One of the neatest accomplishments, I think, of 8 Arms to Hold You was identifying the source venue of all of the tracks on Wings Over America.
Really? How'd you do that?
Was done by basically syncing up the tapes of every live show and matching it with the album.
Oh my God.
And when they'd sync, you'd know that they were from the same venue.
Well, there's a particular quote that led me to ask this question about Yoko Ono Poem Game. This recording of a cappella word association from Yoko has yet to be bootlegged. One can only hope that there was no need for a second take.
I have not yet found the second take.
And thus, the world can live another day. And now I will ask about Lennonology, which is your other baby, so to speak. I have less specific questions because I'm more interested in the general, because it's a really big undertaking. It's like the John equivalent, or you're writing the John equivalent of the Mark Lewison Chronicle book. How have you managed to get a nearly day-to-day guide of what happened? Like, and I'll ask the same, like, what were your big sources for this?
Well, with Lennonology, completely started from scratch. The book came about by I was gathering update information for 8 Arms to Hold You, and I never got past John. So I'd made a list of all of these people I wanted to talk to and all the questions I wanted to answer and all of the myths that were out there that I wanted to address. And like 8 Arms, Lennonology was a book that was written because I wanted it and it didn't exist yet.
Much like, on a lesser scale, this show, the sole reason it existed is because I wanted to hear people tell their Beatles stories, but no one else was making this show. So it's like, well, I've never made a podcast before. Well, here we go. And now I have at least 7 listeners now. I don't mean to brag. I'm kind of a big deal.
Well, my wife turned it on, too, so now you probably have 8.
Welcome to the fan club.
So, but with Lennonology, decided to start completely from scratch because no one needs another cut and paste book.
Well, when did you start this, Lennonology?
Lennonology was started in 2000, pretty much immediately after the publication of 8 Arms, and I ended up being 13 years late on a 2-year project. It finally was issued and published, self-published in 2015.
Well, sometimes, or as the expression is, good things come to him what waits.
Right, and you get out of it what you put into it. Yeah. So, started from scratch, interviewed everybody that I could find that would talk to us. I brought on Scott Riley a few years into the project just because it was so large, and he was able to help quite a bit with the research and with being a great sounding board. And we basically, if we couldn't validate something without a contemporary news report or contemporary document, photograph, tape, something like that, it didn't go in as a fact. It got in as a if it merited noting, it went in, but with a caveat. Now, the book was written without foresight, so
it's kind of. Would it be fair to say it's like your methodology is like it's fiction until proven fact?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So, and it just came together as this huge puzzle, and we'd eventually find more and more pieces, and the picture would come sharper into focus until we decided to say, I just got to stop. This has to get out. And then it was 6 months of round the clock work, putting it together, getting ready to promote it, marketing it, making it ready for print. And I was very relieved the day that I turned it into the printer. Well,
and the Beatles book world is much better because of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, out of all the sources, were you starstruck, for lack of a better term, by any of the people that you talked to, trying to find out info about John? You're like, I can't believe I'm talking to this person.
Not necessarily, because I think I probably got over that while we were interviewing people for 8 Arms. And, sitting in a hotel room with just you and your co-author and Alan Parsons for 2 hours talking Beatles and Floyd and the like was, that you can get a little starstruck at that. Or with Lawrence Juber sitting there and playing him all of your Wings bootlegs and saying, well, what do you remember about this? Well, that wasn't me, that's Henry, or the like. Or, oh, yeah, I remember when we did this. And, those are some pretty cool things. Or many, many Saturday mornings FaceTiming with May and talking about her time with John.
Well, actually, when this episode goes up, our previous episode, which was our Christmas episode, will feature your aforementioned Lawrence Juber as our special guest.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Wonderful guy.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't recorded it yet, but c'est la vie. It's going to be a great show. It's already a great show, Again, don't take my word. I'm a liar. So I want to ask that John Lennon has become this mythic figure. I feel like it's fair to say a lot of details about his life have gotten kind of distorted through the years. Were there any really big popular myths about John that you kind of set to disprove in this book?
Well, our goal was to provide as much of the truth as we could find and to present it in its most unbiased form. So, by virtue of that, many myths could be disproven just by presentation of the absolute facts. It's been many years since it's been 20 years since started the book, and 5 since I really last read it. So nothing really comes to mind if you're looking for a myth buster.
You'll just have to go read the book then, audience, won't you?
That's right.
And I want to talk, because you can't really talk about John in the years that you're covering his life without talking about Yoko. The same question kind of applies, or it's the same question, but for Yoko. Do you think there's any myths surrounding Yoko that you have set to disprove?
Well, yeah, things like she broke up the Beatles. I mean, we were shocked at how much of the story Yoko really was in their time together. We weren't looking for anything sensational or things like that, but I mean, he did his albums and she had quite a bit of input into those. Likewise, he participated in her artwork projects, and as maligned as she was by the music business, he was maligned by the art world, believe it or not. So, but there was a huge output of work, non-musical work, films and happenings and things like that they did together that really hadn't been documented yet.
I can't remember. My memory is jumbled. This shows you kind of how over the top John and Yoko were. I can't remember if this happened or if it was a scene from the Ruddles. John did the film about his erect penis. Was that the Ruddles or was that real?
No, that was real.
Ah.
No, I have not seen it.
Well, Plastic Ono band box coming out soon. We can only hope.
That's right. That's one of the big gaps in every Lennon collector's arsenal.
It's Carnival of Light and the John Lennon erect penis film.
Thankfully, we haven't seen a lot of fake copies of that show up on YouTube.
Jesus Christ.
Well,
you're not.
How many Carnival of Light are there out there?
It's. Oh my God.
Prove me wrong, Ethan.
Well, now you're begging for it. Some John Lennon impersonator is gonna walk away with this with a great idea.
Only a few people around could verify that nowadays.
Yeah. Well, Yoko's 87 would probably give her a heart attack. And now, kind of as a transition to the rest of my kind of normal Fans on the Run questions, the other day I was at a local record store, and I picked something up which I used to have when I started collecting. I loved it so much, and by loved, I mean beat the shit out of by listening to it, which in a weird way is kind of fitting for what it was, or it'll explain why in a second. The album I picked up was the Capitol Albums, Volume 1. So, in a weird way, I kind of experienced the early Beatles music in the same way a lot of the most of the first generation fans did in the States, with those Dave Dexter Jr. duophonic, weird mixes, the albums, all produced in little tiny mini LP sleeves. And well, I think you know where I'm going with this. I was reading the booklet, as you do when you get like a CD, and I was checking the special credits, and I saw a name listed, and I'm like, huh, I know that guy. Would you tell us who that name was?
That would have been my first Beatles album credit, and to throw that back 30 years I think is the reason I really started to get into all of this and taking the notes and collating all the information, all of that, were Wally Podrazic's sleeve notes on the Rarities album.
Yeah. Wait,
you got him to thank for...
Wait, did Wally write the sleeve notes for Rarities?
Mm-hmm.
God damn it, I didn't know that. Shit, I should have...
For the American version, yes.
I should have asked him about that. Well, there's always room for a part 2.
Right.
Wow.
But no, Wally's, the All Together Now book, and those notes, and along with Nick Schaffner's Beatles Forever book. I mean, those are the start of any Beatle fan's career, I think, or journey.
Along with the Hunter Davies book.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But All Together Now is it's one of the most important books ever written. And I feel like you took the solo aspect of it and amplified it by 100, with filling in all the info you could possibly want for 8 Arms. And that was the intent. Yeah, it's one of the best reference pieces of reference material I've ever read.
We appreciate it.
And so now I want to ask you. This is where it gets fun. What is your, or I'll ask Beatles and I'll ask Lennon. What is your favorite Beatles song?
Strawberry Fields. No, A Day in the Life.
Yeah.
Day in the Life.
Any particular reason?
It's just got everything to it. It's got John, it's got Paul, it's got fantastic instrumentation, it's got wonderful production values, and it is just the quintessential Beatles song. Now, if you wanted one of the pre-studio years, I'd have to go back and say This Boy is probably my favorite Beatles song, just because it's, you don't have a better example of their singing until you get to Because.
Well, you mentioned, or you chose A Day in the Life, and since I can gather from the book, you're a bit of an audiophile. What is your favorite way to listen to A Day in the Life? Like your favorite mix of the song?
Oh, I'll take it pretty much any way I can get it, I think. It depends where I am when the mood hits. If I'm in front of the big system, or if I'm just with the headphones in front of the computer, any way to listen to it's a good way.
Are you a fan of the Giles Martin remix from a couple years ago?
I haven't studied it enough to fairly answer that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when it comes down to it, it's still the Beatles' A Day in the Life. You can only do so much to it, because no matter which way you pan it, you separate all the tracks, it's still the Beatles' A Day in the Life.
Right.
And on the flip side of that question, pun intended, what is your least favorite Beatles song?
Boy, I don't know that there really is one.
Well, maybe one that you have listened to so much that you've gotten sick of and you never want to really hear it again.
I don't want to start the hate mail, so I'm gonna.
I take the hate mail. I'm the one in the comments arguing with people. You have full diplomatic immunity.
I'm not a big fan of the Revolver album.
Oh,
I mean, you've got 3 great John tracks there, but it just doesn't gel with me. Either Revolver or Beatles for Sale. Everything else is.
Whoa! A hush falls over the room. Revolver is my favorite Beatles album.
A lot of people's favorite Beatles album.
But again, that's the wonderful thing about the Beatles. It'll kind of lead into one of my next questions. It could mean anything to different people. Everyone interprets the music in their own way. And as much as I'd like to joke and say to people like, "Oh, you don't like Revolver?" Well, how is life being wrong? But to each their own. But so if Revolver's not your favorite, what is your favorite Beatles album?
Probably the Beatles, just because of the diversity of all the songs and because there is so much there. That's probably the worst thing about it, is that it needs to be listened to as a whole, and you've got to dedicate 94 minutes if you want to hear the whole thing.
And I could ask these. I may do it in kind of a rapid fire, word association type thing. But I'll ask the same for John, since Lennonology. What is your favorite John Lennon song?
Instant Karma.
And I'll also ask, because the new big remix box, Give Me Some Truth, has come out. Have you gotten a chance to listen to the remix of Instant Karma?
Yes. Yeah, I've listened to the remixes a couple of times.
What do you think of, or about the Instant Karma one in particular? Or you can just... I have mixed opinions on the box.
I actually prefer the surround mixes on the Lennon Legend DVD.
Really?
The 5/1 mixes on that, just because there's so much more discrete information. I understand what they were trying to achieve with the new Ultimate mixes, and that was to bring John's voice to the fore and push everything else back, and to leave John's voice somewhat untreated. But just kind of being the researcher that I am, when something's discreet and you can hear just that guitar part on its own, it speaks volumes. Mm-hmm. There's just so many things that can be learned from those mixes than can be learned from the new Ultimate mixes.
Well, I think that's one of the best things that's happened to Beatles analysis in the past dozen years is the Rock Band game having all the stems for mm-hmm. a lot of the Beatles songs, including like entire albums like Rubber Soul and Sgt. Pepper, and being able to go as just, you know, a normal schmuck fan and act like you're in Abbey Road Studios with Jeff Emmerich and just turn down the fader and just, you know, hear just the bass or Ringo's drumming.
Mm-hmm. It's I remember when I was very young sitting in front of my parents' record player thinking, wow, in this, we're talking early 70s here, it'd be really cool to hear all these instruments on their own.
Yeah. Well,
so it only took 40 years for it to happen.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if they kind of knew that would happen when they put out the game, knowing that like someone would data mine it and find those files.
And the lines are still blurred quite a bit on those because, as you know, a lot of those were 4-track recordings, and you can't really extract unique instruments like you could if it was a 32-track recording. So
that's why the drums sound a little like, unless you have the drums, the bass, and like the rhythm guitar, the drums sound just like and they just sound like mush.
There are a lot of artifacts left there, but you know, who knows, someday maybe they'll all leak, maybe they'll all be issued commercially as a download option, which I think is probably one of the next places these artists are going to have to go, is to release session tapes as streaming. Yeah. For example, King Crimson and the Court of Crimson King, the album set, the CD box set that's coming out in a couple of weeks.
Wait,
here.
What? There's a box coming out?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know about this.
It is every minute of the sessions for the album.
Holy shit. Okay, you just made me a very excited man. Because, well, King Crimson was one of the few holders out on streaming until, like, earlier this year. And I was so excited when I was finally able to, you know, listen on my phone to, you know, Epitaph or 21st Century Schizoid Man.
Well, now you can get all 10 takes of each song, and so very much looking forward to that.
Well, you know what they say, Robert Fripp giveth and Robert Fripp taketh away. So, favorite song, Instant Karma. What is your least favorite song?
I haven't been asked that before, believe it or not.
Your least favorite John Lennon song?
Yeah. It's might be something off of Sometime in New York City.
Yes, the maligned one. Mm-hmm. The only one where the cover can't even really be presented in its entirety these days.
I don't know how they're going to issue that as a box set.
I have no idea. That because the album kicks off with the song with the controversial title, "Woman is the something of the something." We'll say I don't know how they're going to reconcile that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it'll be nice if it gets the same treatment as the other albums, but I don't know how that can be marketed.
Well, that whole Sometime in New York City album, there's some good tracks on it in my opinion, but it's a clusterfuck.
You know, one song that I have trouble listening to in its commercial released form is One Day at a Time with the falsetto vocals.
Okay.
I think that was really an ill-advised direction on that song. I think you can hear the outtakes where it's not delivered as falsetto, and it's just such a better song in that format.
And what is your favorite John Lennon album?
Double Fantasy's got a warm place because that's the first album that I bought as a fan that I wasn't catching up on purchasing the catalog. That was the first one that I bought new. I like Walls and Bridges a lot. I'm a huge Elton fan, which contributes to that. And it's hard to find anything wrong on Plastic Ono Band.
Speaking of Elton and the John Lennon, and we were talking about the Ultimate Mixes, that's one of the biggest travesties I think the new box did. They completely butchered Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Because to me, the track is like, it is, you need that Phil Spector Wall of Sound 1974 production. It's what gives the song its charm, and it feels naked when I'm listening to it now.
You need to hear Elton for one thing.
Yeah.
So I would listen to the Lennon Legend mixes hands down any day over those.
And I'll kind of do these quick fire because, they're the other ones that aren't John. What is your favorite Paul album?
Ram or Back to the Egg?
What is your favorite George album?
I like Somewhere in England a lot, which is an odd choice. I like the George Harrison album a lot.
I was going to say, I've never gotten the Somewhere in England.
That trio of late 70s, early 80s albums, and his production and his songwriting, he was so happy at that time, for example, on the George Harrison album, that it just came across fantastic on record.
How do you feel about Gone Troppo?
It's to a lesser degree, and I mean, everything's been said about All Things Must Pass.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful album, and I prefer a lot of the stripped down acoustic or electric guitar demos to some of the things on record. But people say it has to be remixed, but it is what it is because of Spector.
Well, I think we have a chance at getting it remixed because for the Black Friday Record Store Day, they're putting out a 45 of My Sweet Lord with some new remix, which is it a new remix? I think so. Well, I think it's a new remix. I would just assume so. But if they've managed, because that usually means it's a teaser for like some big box, and I've heard some stuff that some of the people working on the John stuff are working on some George stuff. So I can only assume there's going to be an All Things Must Pass box, which this means this year is going to be a nightmare for people who are buying.
I don't know that we're going to see a lot more this year.
Well,
per se, just because of the anniversary. I think, the Plastic Ono Band we're not going to see this year. It's just too late to announce it and market it. Same for All Things Must Pass. Well, unless they just decide to drop them out of nowhere, and I don't think that's the way the marketing goes these days.
Well, I think the original plan was to put Plastic Ono Band out because you can see it listed in the Gimme Some Truth stuff, and there was the book that came out.
Yeah, you guys have that already. We don't see that down here in the States for another couple weeks.
Is it out in Canada?
I know it's out in Europe already.
Okay.
I haven't checked the Canadian dates, but all I know, it's not out here till the 13th.
Well, I have something else to add to my Christmas list now.
Sure.
Yeah, but my worst case scenario is that they managed to put out Plastic Ono Band, All Things Must Pass, and like they've already announced McCartney 3. So it's like, okay, so I have to buy all of them as a collector?
That's the weight we bear.
Yeah, you
didn't ask me my favorite Ringo album.
Oh, I almost forgot. What is your favorite Ringo album?
Sentimental Journey.
The first one.
The first one. And you know, Ringo's a great album, and Goodnight Vienna's a very good album, but you know, those are the top. You know, those are the public's favorite.
Yeah. And lastly, I want to ask, what do the Beatles mean, or what have the Beatles and, you know, the Solo Beatles mean in your life? Like, what have they meant to you?
Well, the music is all, you know, music's a huge part of my life. There's always something on, it seems, and they basically gave me a great foundation to discover all of these other musicians. I mean, for example, Wally and Harry's book, you know, turns you on to all these other people, and it's just an ever evolving.
Because wasn't that like how you would find out about like people like Billy J. Kramer and Jerry and the Pacemakers?
Leon Russell.
Yeah, Jackie Lomax.
Mm-hmm. So I tend to fall back to more of the music that was popular when I was 16, 17, which would have been the late 70s. I'll tend to listen to more nowadays, but the Beatles are always a great part of the music library.
And
always tripping over one of them around here.
And my final question, and it's over to you. Where can people find these books, and is there anything more you'd like to say about them?
I think both of the books are available at LENNONOLOGY.com. 8 Arms to Hold You is now only available as an ebook because the original sold out and was going for 3 figures.
I noticed that.
So the e-version has about 25,000 new words in place of old bad words.
Actually, I'll just jump in here. Message to all eBay scalpers. Go fuck yourselves. And end of message. And
Lennonology is available in paperback. I still have a few hardbacks. They're more of a B stock variety now than mint copies. But unfortunately, if you live outside of the United States, the postal rates are exorbitant and cost more than the book itself. But if you're looking for something on the Solo Beatles to broaden your horizons as to what exists and what's out there, by all means go with 8 Arms. If you're looking for more of a reference historical look at John and Yoko's career, both artistically and personally, Lennonology is the way to go.
Yeah, I just really want to thank you for being here today. I've had a blast talking with you.
Great, my pleasure.
And anyone I can talk bootlegs and all these mixes, the stuff that like I try and talk to my friends about, and that's the reason why my friends don't talk to me anymore. It's like, Ethan, I don't care what stampers were used in the 1972 pressing of the Concert for Bangladesh. Shut up. But yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, it's the burden of life, but it's the hill I'm willing to make my stand on. I think I butchered that expression, but that's a trademark of the show. The host has no idea what he's talking about, and he is, you know. Yeah, well, you know. Anyways, thank you so much for coming on the show. I forgot to do my big spiel, the aforementioned spiel. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please hit that like button, please hit that red subscribe button, and please hit that bell notification so you get notified every time a merry old episode of Fans on the Run goes up, which is every Friday. And, well, yeah, every Friday, every Friday. There's no exception to the rule. And you can find it on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Podbay, anywhere good podcasts can be heard and most bad ones. Please give me a 5-star, or actually, I'm not going to ask for a 5-star. If you like the show, please give us a rating. I really appreciate the feedback. It always makes my day when I see a nice little review. It makes me feel good about myself and not like I'm screaming into the void with this show. But anyways, that was my spiel. Thank you so much. To everyone else out there, you can go home now.
Fans on the Run is produced by Ethan Alexanian. Additional voiceovers by Richard Phillip. This has been a Showtown production.